Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Madison, Alderman Stratton,
Here.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Here.
Alderman Smith, Alderman Bowling.
Here.
Okay. The next thing on the agenda is a prayer, and immediately following a pledge of allegiance to the flag. The prayer is by Alderman Richard Bowe. Richard.
Our most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we do thank you so much for the beautiful day that you give us to enjoy, and we thank you for many blessings that you've given to us. Now, Lord, we ask you to be with the ones here this morning that what decisions is made here this morning is for the benefit of the citizens of Bluff City. And we thank you, Lord, so much for the people who came out that's interested in this. So, Lord, again, thank you for everything you've done for us. Be with us throughout this meeting. Be with us throughout this day, and forgive us where we failed you. For these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're into the first section of the citizens' comments. If you have a comment, come to the podium and give your name, address, and phone number. And if we have no comments, we'll move on to the discussion/action, the first reading on ordinance number 2018-007. Sharon Green.
This is ordinance number 2018-007, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 2018-003, known as the Appropriations Ordinance for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. Whereas the Board of Mayor and Aldermen deem it necessary to purchase a new automated meter reading system, in that the old one has crashed for health, safety, and welfare for the citizens of the town of Bluff City. And whereas the correct price for the automated meter reading system is $24,952. Whereas the Board of Aldermen wish to pay it cash for the system, be it therefore ordained by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen of the town of Bluff City, Tennessee, ordinance number 2018-003, as to the line item 413, Water Sewer Fund, be amended as followed. $921,380. The ordinance shall take effect.
It's 388.
Excuse me. 388. The ordinance shall take effect from and after its final passage through public welfare requiring it.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Can I ask a question first?
Mm-hmm.
What is wrong with the old one? What does it consist of?
It's just totally messing
It's
up.
outdated. I can't remember exactly when that program was purchased, but like right now, whenever we're encountering any errors regarding meter readings or anything like that, we're not able to get it fixed or get any services applied to it because it's out of date right now, and we're pretty much at the point where we're behind the curve. Like they're about to come up with newer system, and we're not even. They're like pretty much too far behind, and we kind of at the point where we're catching up pretty much when it comes down to meter readings and stuff like that. Like our system is at the point where it's outdated, and like in order to get any assistance or anything like that, they're not able to provide it because they no longer work on the old operating system, and it's going down to the point where we're on Windows 7 and they're on Windows 10, and none of our equipment is basically compatible with what they have going on now. And they don't make those for Windows now.
Is all those meter reading pieces that's in the meters now, will all that be changed, or You're
The
using?
programming itself is what needs to be changed right now, and with the new system, like with the new meters that we have to purchase right now, like whereas they don't sell the old meters, the meter readers anymore, they won't be compatible with the new system, so we basically have to.
We have to change out all the readers in the meters then.
No, not exactly. The old readers, they still will work with the new system, but everything going forward, like we basically can't continue to go back and purchase the old ones because they don't sell those anymore.
Okay.
So we're at the point where we really don't have many options when it comes down to the meter reading software and everything that goes into it. Like we kind of fallen behind the curve.
So you think this old system is not reading the meters, not reading right, or?
They're not reading like this previous session. Like we've had to go back out 3 times just taking it out of the system, and that's because we're not updated, and we've been having to go around and basically manually read just about all these meters, and we got excess of 1,500 meters in the meters. I mean, in the system, and we're
Yeah.
having to basically go around and read every one of them
Okay.
because it's kicking it out of the system, and it's taking a lot of time and effort just to basically get these readings. And I mean, it kind of sucks once you get the reading, you put it in the program, and it basically kicks it out, and then you got to go back and get another reading. So,
Okay.
Basically, you're to the point that you're manually reading them, basically.
Yes.
That system was installed a little more than 15 years ago.
So does it make sense?
Also, that Sandy can't get the bills. She's having to manually put stuff in. The system won't transfer over to our accounting system.
Okay.
And it's duplicating it, so many errors in it now that the last 2 months she has spent, you wouldn't believe the number of hours that she's had to spend trying to get the billing out.
If I recall correctly, y'all used to, you had about 4 to 6 men, and it would, when you were doing manual readings, it would take about 2 weeks of their time. And when the automated meter reading came in, it put it down to about a day, then yes, it was working.
Yes.
Okay.
Sharon, repeat, I know you said it was 413, which line?
You know, we're away from citizens' comment right now. We're trying to take care of this.
We've already approved that. Oh, no, we haven't.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Take a vote, please.
Alderman Stratton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Yes.
Alderman Bowman.
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item. Discussion and action on the water treatment plant improvements. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you all for having me this morning. I'm here today to update you on our current USDA project with respect to the water treatment plant. I know that, as you all recall, with the grant loan that you're currently in the middle of, we had 3 separate contracts set up within that. The first one was for the wastewater pump stations. The second was for the ongoing water and sewer work. And this third one was to make water treatment plant improvements that basically at that time, or as we went into it, were the main things it was going to include were a new finished water tank and a backwash tank. We basically put together.
Dave.
Yes, sir.
Could I interrupt just a minute? We don't have a mic there.
Is that it on the table?
I'm mumbling.
gosh.
Probably if you want to come over here and just use one of these.
It says you can use one of these.
You'll just sit down, or
Yeah, you can.
can I come around there with you?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Mr. Fry's chair, that's a good one.
Oh, yeah.
If I get past you. Thank you. Thank you all. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to update you again. Our current USDA Rural Development, Rural Utility Services project that is ongoing had been separated into 3 contracts. The first contract was for the wastewater pump stations. The second is for the ongoing water and sewer work. And the third was for improvements to the water treatment plant. The preliminary numbers that we had for the water treatment plant improvements was roughly $450,000. We've kept that in mind as we've proceeded, and again, the main 2 things that the project was to consist of were going to be the installation of a new finished water tank that would help us establish a consistent pressure zone for the entire system, and then a larger backwash tank that would facilitate operations there. Again, with contract 2 being underway and essentially on budget, we still have contingency left within that we were keeping in mind to possibly be used for contract 3 as well as that money. So just for the purposes of the discussion, the ballpark, right about $500,000 was what we would have moving forward. Our preliminary budget again was about $450,000, but hopefully we'll have contingency remaining from contract 2, and for USDA right now that's one pool of money. So with that in mind, there have been, of course, we proceeded, and you all have seen the documents that we had put together, and we were moving forward, and now Mr. John Oliver's come on board, and he has lent considerable experience and technical expertise to an evaluation of the plant activities. And with that in mind, it's been very, very helpful. It's given us more insight into what is going on. And as you are aware, things have changed. There's been some issues arise that have caused issues at the plant that now we're having to purchase considerable more amounts of water because the plant's not been able to operate. For years and years, we've wondered about and John, please jump in if I say anything that doesn't sound exactly right here. The issue that we have had has been with the raw water and materials getting into the raw water that make it cloudy or that are solids within that. That's in the engineering term, they call that as turbidity. But essentially it's how cloudy it is, how mucky the raw water is. And when that enters your plant, it has to be filtered. And that's essentially what the plant does. Now, the issues we've had over the years is that raw water will come in at a point where it is too dirty, or the turbidity, that's a bad term to use, but just for the sake of us talking, the turbidity is too high and it causes automatic shutdown. The plant, if it sees turbidities, and again, they do those in what's called NTUs. That's the unit, just like feet or inches, but NTUs. And John, I believe if we're over about a 12 on the raw water, then the plant will shut down.
Can't run a 12.
Right.
I feel like it will run anywhere from a 3 NTU to a 5 NTU.
Yeah.
Once you start getting over that, you spend more time backwashing than you do treating.
Yes. And typically, when things are going fine and we don't have issues, our NTUs are around 1 or 1 to 3, or they can't.
Usually, they're less than a 3. Usually hang around 0.6 to 1.6.
Okay. Normally, as you all might expect, we do have our source there is a spring, and there's a spring box. So during wet weather times, or any time you get precipitation, adverse weather, that will increase. Things will wash into the spring. Well, we've always wondered, trying to correlate, because this issue's been going on 20 years, I guess, but never to this point. And what has now occurred, sinkholes have developed near the spring. And I know you have pictures, guys. I think there are 3 in close proximity to the spring itself. And so we finally, that's likely what has been occurring over the years. You know, you can't see it on the ground, and small amounts of this debris would get in during wet weather. Well, now the sinkholes have actually exposed themselves. So
Are they above the spring?
they are above the spring. So it's, at this time, I don't think it's nowhere to the point that we would think we would lose the spring, but it's just, it's going to be having this debris in it, these NTUs. With all of that said, there's no sense in building a new tank or doing other things when the primary function of the water plant is in question. So what we've discussed over about the last month is to suspend the direction we were heading and then go in a direction where we're going to address these issues so that the plant itself can operate
More efficiently.
yes, more efficiently and operate as it was intended to without these struggles. So to do that, I've put together a memo, and John was also with this item in mind, has gone back and reviewed all the operations, and we've had several meetings, and we've also called in some other technical experts to assist us and to look at these issues, and we'd like to propose making revisions to Contract 3 to address these issues, and I'm going to talk about those. And then I think that all told, we will exceed the estimated money that we have of $500,000. And moving forward, would like to propose Contract 3, where we address what we can with that remainder of funding, and then put together another estimated funding package and cost for your consideration to make funding applications in the future.
So this will probably go above $500,000, ain't it?
Yes, sir, I think it will.
How much you think?
Well, we don't have all the final numbers. I'm getting that together, and I committed to, in our USDA meeting on the 14th, to having that before the 1st of the month. We have talked to the folks, for instance, one of the things that in here is to propose to install a sedimentation basin and tube settlers, and there are experts that actually provide that, and they do their engineering. We're currently getting estimated costs from them, and we've come up with what we think. The biggest thing is there's going to be a size associated with that, and that's a tank, and that's concrete. What will that final size need to be, and then we'll base our costs on that. But if it's okay with you all, I'd like to talk about each one of these items just in general, and then you all.
Questions about it too?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I hope I can answer these or get you answers. The first thing that we want to do, many of these items were proposed previously, and I'd like for them to remain in the project because they're necessary. So the first one is what we call SCADA, which is that basically is Systems Control and Data Acquisition, I believe is what that acronym stands for. And what that does is it allows you to continuously monitor the water treatment plant operations and activities, and it will allow you to make changes remotely via computer or phone, even a cell phone or anything where a man does not have to be right there. He can make changes if he wants to. Now, that's not the entire purpose of SCADA. You know, the main purpose is that you will have a running record of what is going on at the plant in terms of always being able to go back and read by chart the water that came in, the condition of that water, then the activities that went on at the plant, and just about any automated process you can actually record and monitor for future consideration and records and data keeping. Normally, you'll keep that in conjunction with your daily reports, and you'll use that to generate daily report information to send to TDEC so that you'll be in compliance with the permit that you have to treat and sell the water. So anyway, we want the SCADA to remain part of the project. There was an existing SCADA package there that was put in at around the same time that your actual automated meter reading came in, so a little more than 15 years ago. And it was a very limited system. At that time, it was used to monitor the hydraulic conditions to operate the Chinquapin booster pump station, to either turn it on or turn it off whenever the plant itself was on or off, so that the folks living back up Underwood Springs would have water and pressure to their water. That was the main purpose of that time. I think over the years, different operators have probably added to it, but it was still very, very limited. And because of that, and as I can tell you all, what's happened over the last 15 years in leaps and bounds, and what the technology will give to you, and the expenses, while it's still expensive, it's come down. In other words, what you could get for $20,000 in 04, you can probably get 10 times the capability for that same money now. So anyway, that's the intent of the SCADA, will be to go with an automated system, an installation that will allow you to have not only the workstation there, but the gentleman that will operate the plant could do that remotely from their handheld devices. And I know at one time we talked about having a workstation here, and I don't know if that's something y'all are still considering or not. Not for operational purposes, just monitoring purposes. Just as a little history, that's kind of neat. The SCADA here in the town of Bluff City used to consist of a gauge that was on the wall in the men's bathroom in the old city hall. And when that gauge would get below 80 psi, they knew that the water in the tank was probably getting low, and they would go turn the pumps on or off. So that first system got rid of that situation. So that was caveman times. Now we come up to better times. And then finally this third package for your consideration. And it would, again, not only monitor those hydraulic conditions, such as how full your water tank is, whether the Chinquapin station is on or not, but also the operations inside the plant, such as the pumps, their run times, what you've pumped into the system. And then all that could be used to correlate and better get a fix on the water you've produced, and utilizing that report with the actual metering, the water you've lost. So that would be an ongoing system. Anyway.
That Chinquapin pump station out there, people don't use that, do they?
Yes, sir. It's still used.
Still used by Chinquapin?
Yes. Well, not Chinquapin. It's the little booster pump at the intersection of Mount Holston that is used right now when your treatment plant is in operations and the water is coming from the plant. You don't have need to utilize that booster pump. The water flows by gravity down into the system, and because you add chlorine at the water treatment plant, you can't just add chlorine there and then give it to your first customer. Yeah. It has to be in the water a certain amount of time so that it does its proper disinfection, and then that it can dissipate where it's not so bad that people can smell or taste the chlorine. So the water will come out and go into the system down to the intersection of Mount Holston, and then comes back up in a 4-inch line. And you have that hydraulic condition when your plant's running to do that. Now, if for any reason, like the high turbidity, the plant shuts off and the pumps are off, you lose that hydraulic capacity. And that's when the old SCADA used to be a man would have to run up and turn the pump station on and then sit there and monitor it. Well, the new SCADA will turn that pump station, the booster pump station at Chinquapin, on so that the folks living back up on Underwood Spring don't lose their water and water pressure. So that's what it still does. And guys, I don't know how much it still is used. I guess it's been used frequently here lately, hasn't it? Since y'all been purchasing water. Now there are, later on I'll talk about that if we do not have this additional finished water tank we were talking about, we'll still need to maintain the booster pump so that those folks continue to have their pressure and service correctly. That pump station also has its issues, and moving forward will include costs to renovate or replace that pump station. It's considerably older. I think it dates back to 92 or 94 was when it was I don't know, first installed, but that's when it was last renovated, so roughly 23 years ago, 24 years ago.
Okay, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, ma'am.
That also will help us on all the state reports that we have to give to the state.
The SCADA will, yes.
Because it eliminates all of our field chart recorders and everything will be straight into the computer. So when you pull out all your information, it's done electronically and eliminates human error, and it makes TDEC a whole lot happier.
I know, again, we don't have the final estimated cost for this SCADA system also, but we have talked to 3 different providers, Mr. Boggs, Mr. Matthews, and the gentleman from Mr. Clark, and we're hoping that each one of those gentlemen will give us a basic specification package for what they propose, given that they've met with you, John, and know the needs that you will request. And for the purpose of just throwing it out there, I know the original SCADA system was roughly $30,000. A new SCADA system, you can probably be anywhere between $50,000 and $200,000, depending on what you actually get. We're hoping that we can get the very minimum that we require and that we want at the most economical cost. And what we will do when we receive the expert opinions and the packages, what I will propose to do is to include them in our contract documents so that they go through a competitive bid process, knowing this other man is also looking at this and bidding, and that we get our best, most competitive bid that way.
Mr. Wilson, did we not have the SCADA system in contract 3?
It was originally in there, yes, ma'am. We had included that, so we want it to remain. And what we would call a revised contract 3. Okay, the second item will be a backwash tank. And the backwash tank, its purpose is to physically hold when your filters reach a point that they've become too dirty to function properly, or and that happens through routine operation and daily operation, then it's recommended by the manufacturer that you basically reverse and blow water back through to unsettle everything, knock that loose, and essentially wash it out, backwash it. And then that water is taken, and because it does have chlorine in it, you can't just send it away. You can't, obviously, you don't send that into the system. People will not drink that water. It is a waste type water at that time. But you need to hold it for a certain amount of time so that the chlorine in the water will burn off or dissipate and down to an acceptable level, and then we discharge it to the creek there beside of the plant, and it goes back to Mother Nature. That is monitored by TDEC, and they're very sensitive about that. One of the worst things that you can do is to not have enough capacity and then send the water onto the creek when it still has the activated chlorine in it at a level that's high enough, essentially, pouring that into the creek. And back, it's been several years ago, but the city did receive a notice of violation many years ago because it did have to put the backwash water into the creek too quickly. You can see different places if you go to different plants around the country, this type of activity, or a wastewater plant where they disinfect. If they're doing that, the receiving stream will be bleached. It'll be, you'll see white rocks, and the vegetation will be clean, killed or wilted out because it's essentially chlorine that you're introducing. So the idea, and the backwash tank had also been in the contract 3 previously. We need to keep that. There's always been questions about the frequency of backwashes, when you need to do them, how much water you need to use to do them. And really, a lot of that comes down to your operator, and your operator knowing the actual system. You want to minimize that if you can, but you still have to know what will the conditions of my filters need to be to best operate. There's 100 efficiency items involved, and I know, John, I don't know how many backwashes, that you can't just say we'll do 2 a week or 2 a month, or it's dependent on the condition of the raw water coming in and the condition of your filters. Are they, as we'll get on to here in a minute, are they in poor shape? Is my media good? Anyway, as Mr. Oliver continues in his operations, I think you'll have a good handle on how much backwash, and as long as we've got the capacity to hold that water there, that's the purpose of this item. Our previous estimate had been at about $45,000 to place this tank. At that time, we were talking about using a bolted steel fiberglass type tank, and I don't want to discount that, but you have experience in using other types of vessels, including plastic. Again, what I would propose to do in our contract document is to name what types of tanks will be acceptable for this use, and then again let the competition drive. As long as we have a standard of care and a standard that we'll accept, we'll consider what is the most economical product. There are some, with a plastic type tank, it can, it can be physically mounted onto a concrete slab. Other tanks, like the bolted steel fiberglass, they construct a ring wall that is built there, and of course you have the geotechnical evaluations and the structural that will go into any of these tanks. That's what we're talking about in item number 2 for y'all to continue to consider.
How many gallon tank is that?
Well,
I see it's our 40,000.
Yes, sir. We'd like to have 40,000, whether that's utilizing your existing about an 18,000 gallon tank and adding.
And we could utilize our existing if we put at least a 20,000 in. That way we'd have 38,000, and according to TDEC we need 36,000. So that puts us 2,000 gallons of head space to play with if need be.
The third item for your consideration, and this is the item that gets right down to the issue at hand. In order to address the condition of the raw water, the water that actually physically comes out of the spring and then goes into the line that is feeding the water treatment plant, we've got to be able to remove as much of that material that's causing its high turbidity as possible prior to it getting to the filters. The best way to do that, there are different ways, and we're evaluating those, and that'll go into our report. But the most common way, and likely the most economical, is to install what's called a sedimentation basin. And that consists of a large tank, open tank, that may have different cells or segments in it for the water to enter and then be directed where you have the most time for it to come in and allow those materials to settle out of the raw water. So you'll be bringing the raw water to the plant and then into this sedimentation basin. We've got another component proposed here which makes a sedimentation basin much more efficient, and that's called tube settlers. And that's essentially a component inside the sedimentation basin that the raw water will flow over and into, and will allow it to essentially filter through those settlers and again remove as much of this material as possible. So you will have water stored in this basin. The raw water is continuing to come in, and hopefully the purpose of this proposed basin will be to settle out as much as we possibly can in an acceptable time period where your filters will be able to operate without shutting down. They won't see this high turbidity. Now, along with that, that was not in the first contract or in the original contract 3. And that is a primary add. I do not have numbers on that. We do have rough dimensions, but we'll have a manufacturer give us estimates for tube settlers, and then the basin itself, typically those are concrete, and you'll have 8 to 12 inch thick walls and base bottom. So it'll be a matter of figuring up how much that formed concrete will cost now that we know the dimensions. And John, I think we've reached the point that we know the basic dimensions. I left them on your drawing there, but we would propose to put this on the existing site, just as south of the existing building or behind the existing building as you drive up to it. The next item was also not in the original contract 3, and that is in addition to this sedimentation basin and the tube settlers, we'd like to investigate. We may need to add another chemical, usually an alum, an aluminum type product, or it's called permanganate. Basically a metal-based type product that is used on projects throughout the water industry. I'm sure all of our neighbors here, Johnson City, Bristol, they all likely add this to their raw water. It's essentially an addition that comes in and is introduced and then quickly mixed. They call it a flash mix system, and that puts this product into your raw water. It makes the dirt bind. It will cause it to clump more quickly, and when it clumps, it adds weight and it'll settle out quicker. So if you had this sedimentation basin and I don't know these numbers, this has not been designed at this time, but just for the purposes of our discussion, our raw water may come into this basin and it has to sit in the basin 10 minutes before it's at an accept. Things have settled. Obviously, I think we'll be talking about more than that, but just for argument, 10 minutes before it can go on to the filters. When you add this material, you may cut that time down to 3 minutes or 4 minutes. Then essentially that's heavier than the water, and then that will be your residual after the operations are complete that you would then gather and dispose of. That, again, was not in the third project, but it is in our proposed revision, and so and I do not have costs at this time. We're getting those costs. Finally, well, not finally, but our next item itself is proposed to address the filters. And Mr. Oliver, you've come in and looked at these. I know since the plant was constructed in 93 or 94, we have 2 filter trains there, and you can speak to their capacity, but they're essentially rated, both of them together, for the city or the town to be able to produce 324,000 gallons a day, or roughly 225 gallons per minute. Yeah.
Is probably 90% capacity, and you really don't want to run it too far past the 90% capacity.
So that's the essential component of your water plant, these filters. Since 94, what happens over time is that a filter, just like any filter, like let's say in a fish tank, it will get dirty as time goes on. The backwashes occur, and each time you do backwash, you'll mix your media a little bit. You have successive layers of gravel and sand and coal, different carbonaceous materials that allow the water to be filtered. When you backwash, obviously that gets disturbed, and then they'll commingle. Over time, the filters need to be maintained and replaced. Usually the media itself is taken out and new media put in. That did occur in one filter train. I do not know. I was not a part of that project. I don't know what time it occurred. It's probably more than 10 years ago, I would guess. But the second filter has never been changed to my knowledge. So what we would like to do with this project, this was not in the original contract 3 either, is to look at the costs and performing the work to repair and replace this media. And
Increase productivity.
Because right now, the one train that has never been changed, see, the state requires us to have at least 30 inches of media. I'm setting about 15 on the other.
So we'll increase capacity then.
What it'll do is it'll allow us to be able to stay running right around that 200, 225 gallons per minute range without having to backwash as often in between.
Right.
Just keeps us running for longer. And hopefully if we have heavy rains and the NTUs do come up, the newer filter media will handle it a whole lot better than the older. So we'll still be able to achieve right around 200, 225 gallons per minute at all times.
I know that the question of the increased capacity is dear to everyone here. You want to be able to have to be able to grow essentially and to attract commercial or industrial interests, or even to meet your residential demands. The best way that would likely occur, and now this is a little bit off subject, but at this plant would be to add an additional filter train, or to consider larger filters in some form or fashion at this location, and we're constrained. It's a space issue, and the building there is as tight as it can get right now. You know, you would need a new building or some innovative way to. And I don't know offhand what exactly it would be there to do that. But the good news is you have this spring source. I mean, it has been reliable. You do have this turbidity issue that was gnawing at us all these years, and now we know the actual problem. You know, there have been a lot of speculation in the past of why our turbidities went up to the level that they did, and I know that it had been mentioned that folks four-wheeling in the area, or even vandalism to a point, but now we know, I think it was probably a result of these sinkholes coming, and that it just takes time, you know, hundreds of years for those to develop. But then they can develop overnight, so once it's here, it's here. With all that being said, the final item that, and with all this, I was trying to, these first 5 items, hopefully, if at all possible, would like to, when we get our estimated costs, that they'll match closely with that $500,000 that we've proposed. If not, we'll need to look at prioritizing what we can and removing something and looking ahead. The final item that was going to be proposed, though, is there was a replacement pump, or was it just a pump motor? What had already occurred at the plant, we were going to put into the application to seek reimbursement for what the town already spent, so that it could be within this grant loan from yesterday.
Right?
Yeah.
So one pump has been installed today.
So either we either bought a new pump or it's all been reworked. We're just short one motor at the current moment. We've got redundancy in all of the other 2 motors. We got a total of 3 pumps and motors that should be operating, but we're just short one more.
Now
So if we add another pump, then all 3 of them, all of it would be working, where we have places to put.
yes, ma'am.
Plus motor in it instead of, we got all 3 pumps
That's all 3 pumps. It's just one motor.
that we've already purchased. And that's what he's trying to get the reimbursement of what we've spent so far back, that we've already paid out.
Now, given all those items, there are still other issues that Mr. Oliver has identified, and these are in no particular order. They were just listed, and these would be items to consider for what may be a future application for funding. And beginning, trying to follow from the source back down through the system, there likely needs to be repairs to the spring box and to the raw water line that's coming from the spring box to the water plant. I know we have driven that line and observed it in many places. I think it was more or less laid, not totally, but close to being laid on top of the ground instead of trenched in when that work was actually completed, which would have been many years ago. And over time, the cover has eroded off of it, and it has been exposed. And Alan, you all have had to add materials over top to cover it at times, haven't you? It's probably, my guess would be, it is not watertight and has many places it's probably come apart. That hurts your turbidity also. When I say come apart, it just maybe micro millimeters, but given the condition of what we have observed, that's likely the case. The second item would be to engage the services of an engineer that can do geotechnical work to basically give us a report on these sinkholes and what they believe will continue to happen, and if there are any things that we can do to remediate the sinkholes to stop them from continuing to grow, or to possibly, I know one of the main things is to clear them, to allow them to drain properly, and then that will stop them from growing.
How big are they now?
Pretty massive. They're decent size. The main issue right now that we're seeing is the rock and slate that's coming from these sinkholes. We're starting to see it in our spring box, and that's kind of attributed to the turbidity spikes also. Because we just recently, not long before meeting left, we pumped all the sand and gravel from our spring box, and we're pretty much just a year later back at that point where we're seeing a decent amount of gravel and stuff back in the spring box. So it's like an ongoing thing that's been occurring. We kind of need to figure out how to get that situation resolved, because it's like the more and more we're seeing it happen, the more and more issues are starting to arise. So it's something that really needs to be changed.
I would, just as my thinking evolves and we have realized this issue, it may be with our report that we're completing for USDA that we include funding for geotechnical to go ahead and look at that with the revised contract 3. So could there be an issue there that is worse than we know that might cause us to lose the spring or something? So we probably, when my report comes in, I'll have a discussion of that and what we need to look at. I don't think nobody's has thought that would be worst case. We've not really beat that around. And you do have pictures, Mr. Will, of those. The third item, when Ms. Nidifer was here, I know she had implemented some repairs. The clear well that is under the current filter and or under the existing plant, where your finished water that you're putting into the system is stored before entering the system. It's about 5,500 gallons, I think, 5,500. Is that correct, John? I'm not 100% sure.
It's in that range.
Yeah, okay. It's not exceptionally large, but anyway, that is where your finished water is, and it is coated. It has a special epoxy-based potable water coating. It's a special manufacturing here in Tennessee. There is a firm, Tanemic, but you can't just go paint it with anything. There's a special coating and painting used. Some repairs to the clear well have been implemented, and what we might propose with future work is to look at completing anything and everything related to that clear well, filling any cracking, doing any patches you would need to, and then this new coating. An item that has come up again with our the thoughts of adding a third filter train, but not necessarily being the main thing. When you do have a need to get in and pull your pumps and your motors and I think what's been encountered is that there's not a good system of doing that. They're cumbersome, they're very heavy, and normally what you'll have is some type of hoist to be able to, on a movable track type system, to be able to be positioned over top, hook up and actually lift it and move it and remove it from the building. And now I think they're just manhandled, aren't they, guys?
We don't have any mechanism in play right now to remove any pumps anymore. We're pretty much tight on space, like pretty much no headroom. We basically had to go the old way of doing things. We had to rig up some boards and stuff like that to give us access to put in these pumps. It's a very cumbersome and dangerous process that we have to go through just to get these pumps or whatnot raised up out, because our pumps, it pretty much goes down at least a good 6 foot down below, and whenever you only got like right at 7 feet of headspace to work with, I mean, by the time you pull those pumps out, you're pretty much confined on space, and it's pretty tough. It's a tough task just trying to remove anything from that water plant, like the headroom. We don't have, there's lines running pretty much everywhere, so just getting anything done in that confined space, it makes your job a whole lot tougher. So it's just not a matter of pulling a pump and it being easy. Like we basically had to rig up a hoist to get these jobs done. And I'm sitting there and saying we need another building or whatnot, but we need something in place in order to be able to hold these pumps and stuff like that whenever we do encounter these issues, because it's taking just about a 6-man crew just to get the pump pulled. That should not be.
You should be able to do it with 2 people with these.
So moving forward, what that item would be is, can we do any changes to the building that would allow us to install a hoist mechanism for future considerations? That's the intent of that item. The next 2 items really go together. I still would like to keep the new finished water tank in mind, as you know, that if properly done would allow us in the future to be on one pressure zone. It's located there where your water's produced, and along with the SCADA, it would centralize and monitor everything. You do have the tank here in the town, but I think that several of the old issues with that tank have now been worked out, including how full it is and how it actually fills and closes. Over the years, the town has continued to grow, and as it has grown, the newer connections have been above where the tank can realistically keep providing that same pressure zone. So there have been what's called bladder tanks installed to give those intermittent areas pressure. The new tanks would still address those issues, but now obviously with these other things, it's fallen in priority. So if we go with what we're proposing, if the funding is there and we're able to put the sedimentation basin in, we're not going to have room for a tank there now. So the idea would be twofold: to install the tank, but also to find a location that it may be installed. And one of the main places would be to look at the property across from the water plant. It is challenging. It's fairly steep. So when you talk about acquiring such possibly an acre or 2 acre parcel from something like that you could level and install a tank, you'd also need to have the access road to it, the level place, and then fencing for protection and lighting typically. So those 2 items that I would like for you to consider in the future will be finding that property, the cost of improving the site, and then the installation of the finished water tank. That, again, the finished water tank had been in the contract 3. We're now proposing, due to priorities, to push that down the road. when you do that, that means that we need to continue to live with the Chinkapin booster pump station. Since we don't have that higher pressure located at that location now, it will need to continue to be operational. And I think, given its age and condition, items have come up there also. It's currently a horizontal installation and close to the creek, and we've had issues with the creek getting up and causing some electrical shortage issues in the operation of the booster pump. Anyway, those things can be lived with, but ideally we would, if we're going to continue in the long term, the booster pump should be properly placed using new vertical boosters above those locations so that it can function and give your folks back up Underwood Springs and in that area the pressures that are required. You are required by TDEC to maintain 20 pounds per square inch at the meter. And when, given that, obviously if this tank is not operating and the plant's down, you can't do that.
I don't think that it's going to be long. We're going to have to move that pole, that electric light pole there that provides the
For the booster,
to
yeah.
that, because it is the banks falling off there. John, did you have those figures on the cost of the city manufacturing water versus what we're paying for water?
Based at 225 gallons a minute, which is 324,000 a day, based on my price quote for chlorine and GPAC through CI Thornburg Group, we'd be producing water at about $12 a day.
Okay. Did you have versus what we're paying for water from Bristol Bluff?
I think we're paying roughly around $3 a thousand.
Sharon, is that?
Yes, it's close to, well, it's a little less when they did the rate structure. So it's a little less than that.
But that's quite a difference.
Yeah, that's a big difference even at that. It looks like the rates went from 270 to 290, according to the amount purchased.
So even say if we bought it at $2 a day on 300,000, that would be $600 a day compared to $12 a day. You're talking about a difference of $588 a day
Yeah.
as to when we're producing to buy.
So it's going to cost us more to produce than it is to buy it?
No, we can produce it.
No, it's
$12
vice
a day.
versa.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand. Okay.
You tell them what you said again, $12 a day versus.
Versus $600 a day at buying.
Okay, all right.
And Mr. Wilson, I think we were talking about, at during this time, USD they actually have quite a bit of money.
Yes, ma'am. In our last meeting, Mr. Trivett, Lewis Trivett, who's the Northeast Tennessee representative, and he's been administering your existing package. He indicates that they do have funding available now. So it will be a good time to entertain a new application. Obviously, he cannot guarantee that it would be a grant. It may be some combination. There's always the possibility that it could be a grant. Just for our purposes, I would always think loan when we're talking, so we're conservative. You all know with the rate increases that have occurred in the town, those things I have more than certain have gotten the town to a level where you are within their parameters for what your rates should be, so that you're looked favorably upon when it comes time to consider grants, if that makes sense.
So right now we don't have the money to do this with grant
No, sir.
otherwise.
No, sir. Not the items past number 6, the items there at the bottom that I've listed.
All right.
And possibly not some, but
But
what,
the rest of it,
I hope so. I hope when I have the report completed and we have all of our numbers in.
But it's not like that we have to do all those other items just bunched up and we have to do every one of them.
No, they're presented here, so that hopefully the idea is what what you're facing. This is
They're not prioritized then.
not at this time, no. They are those items that the last items I've mentioned are behind. And when I do my report, I'll give you priorities. Obviously, this the sedimentation basin and doing something with your raw water, that's going to have to be the highest priority. And shortly behind that, and along with that, the backwash, and then of course the SCADA. Those are the biggest items. Yeah, the filter media, obviously.
So we're either going to have to borrow the money or get a grant to do this with.
I hope that the $500,000 that we have in our existing package, will be able to address most of those first 6 items. Now, again, when we have these other costs in for the SCADA and for the sedimentation basin, I will, by the nature of what you're involved in, we have to submit a revised preliminary engineering report. That has to be completed for them to consider moving ahead with their existing funding. So I would consider this meeting, what I've been telling you, is very preliminary. It's what's going to consist of putting our engineering report together, and then from that report, the final decision should be based, and then whatever package USDA may be able to offer in the future, Mayor. The final item, just to clear this, is very, very smart. You know, we do continue to have an alternate water source. That alternate water source is the Bristol Bluff City Utility District, and the connection there is an older type connection that's manually operated at this time if you need the water or not. The man goes out again with the new technology and to be able to dial that connection in, so to speak, to get the water you want. We should consider a new automated valve there also hooked to the SCADA, so that at any time of day or at any place, a man with the that is I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of, an authorized individual with a handheld or at a computer can operate that valve without someone going out there and physically doing it. That would also increase your accountability as far as being able to dial it in and to make it more cost effective instead of someone there guessing. That would be the final item for consideration in the future. But that's basically the entire intent of the memorandum and what I wanted to discuss today. And again, from here we are moving ahead, finishing the preliminary engineering, and hopefully we'll have much better cost estimates, and with the contingency remaining that will explain what we can do with the remaining funds, and then moving forward what we may be looking at for the entire package and possible future action.
Make a motion.
Do we have a second?
What do you like from
A motion
To go through it.
To go through it.
to approve that?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Take a vote, please.
Alderman Stratton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Yes.
Alderman Bowles.
Yes.
And Mayor, if I might, just to add, after we do finish that engineering report, I know not all the aldermen are here. I'd like to, if we could have a work session to go back over this, I'd really want them to understand, okay, and participate, okay.
Only thing we can do is to call a workshop, and we just haven't been able to get these people to show up. So,
Can you do the citizens' comments without,
oh,
I need to go to work.
you need to go to
Get
work.
back-
Okay.
get back.
Okay, we can go to the citizen comment. If anybody has a comment, come to the podium, give your name, address, and phone number. Okay, go ahead. I didn't see you getting up. No, you're fine.
Julie Venable Party, 209 Smith Street Extension, 423-538, 7931. I just, when y'all were talking about the water and everything and the chlorine, by the time it gets to my house, should I be able to smell it or taste it? Well,
No.
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 That's where we're on Bristol Bluff City right now.
because my husband, and I'm allergic to it, that's why I'm asking. but you can actually turn it on, and the smell, you can really smell it. And I told them we must be buying it again.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just want,
If you're smelling chlorine, that normally means that there's what,
It's either really high or really low.
yeah, so,
okay, I just wanted, I was telling my husband that we
Don't
must
they
be buying it again. I just want to make sure.
add that chlorine to the water at a certain time of day?
No, it's constantly fed at the water plant.
It is pretty
Okay.
It's
strong.
constantly injected into the process as it's going out, so.
Okay.
And
John?
I think, I talked to Bristol Bluff City yesterday, they're leaving their plant around 2.3, 2.4 parts per million right now.
I've never smelled it or tasted it in my house.
I do
I haven't
want
I just go up down the
seriously.
street down here.
Well, I
Yeah, I know where
the
you
other
live.
end.
I know where you live.
Well, let's put it this way: is it dangerous to cook with?
No, it's not perfectly
But it's never, I never tasted or smelled it in my house.
My husband wants to.
So you don't think you need to check it, John?
I mean, it happens occasionally.
With them leaving at a 2.4, it's well below state limit, because state limits is a 4.0. You can't leave the plant anything higher than a 4, so.
Oh, okay.
I just thought.
Oh, no, I'm glad you asked the question. I'm glad you asked the question.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Does anybody else have a comment? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second mine.
Take a vote, please.
Alderman Stratton, Alderman Stratton, Vice Mayor Hampton.
I think they're all yes.
Alderman Bowles.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's one thing you'll get a 100% vote on, right?